You interact with the ghost of the Roman Empire every single day. The layout of our modern legal systems, the architecture of our Capitol buildings, and the very political vocabulary we use, words like Senate, Republic, and veto, all trace back to a single ancient civilization. But before it was a superpower, it was a cluster of small farming and trading villages. Around 625 BC, these settlements banded together along the banks of the Tiber River in central Italy for mutual protection. For its first century, Rome was ruled by kings. Initially, this worked well, as the kings were elected by a ruling body called the Senate, rather than inheriting the throne. The breaking point arrived with the seventh king, Tarquin the Proud, who abandoned the rules and governed as a ruthless tyrant. The citizens and nobles finally revolted. In 509 BC, they overthrew Tarquin. Instead of crowning a new monarch, they dismantled the throne entirely and built a completely new form of government, the Republic. The Republic was specifically engineered to prevent one person from holding absolute power. Society was divided into two main classes, the wealthy patricians, who held most of the influence, and the working-class plebeians. Together, they elected two consuls, guided by the Senate. This structure turned Rome into a highly effective military machine. Over the next few centuries, they expanded their borders across the entire Italian peninsula. They fought 3 brutal Punic Wars against Carthage, taking over the western Mediterranean, and pushed eastward to conquer Greece. But that explosive territorial growth broke the system that created it. The massive influx of wealth and captured lands mostly benefited the elites, creating extreme inequality back home. Politicians who tried to pass reforms for the poor were assassinated, leading to violent political gridlock and constant civil wars. The Republic's defining feature, its relentless drive to expand, created an empire too massive and fractured to be governed by a city-state's democratic council. The political center could no longer hold. Into this chaos stepped Julius Caesar. As a governor and military commander, Caesar spent years conquering the independent tribes of Gaul, modern-day France and Belgium. This incredibly brutal campaign made him wildly popular with the Roman public and highly dangerous to the paranoid Senate. Ordered to surrender his military command, Caesar refused. In 49 BC, he marched his army toward the capital and crossed the Rubicon River. He hunted down his political rival, Pompey, eventually defeating him, and took total control. Caesar declared himself dictator for life. A faction of senators believed that by killing Caesar, they could restore the old democratic order. They assassinated him on the Senate floor. However, the Roman public fiercely revolted against the assassins. The murder plunged Rome into a devastating, prolonged civil war. From the ashes of those wars, Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, crushed his remaining rivals. In 27 BC, he took the title Augustus and became Rome's first true emperor. The Roman democratic experiment was officially dead. Augustus ruled for 41 years, initiating a long period of stability known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. He reformed laws, built massive infrastructure, and ended the constant infighting. But this peace relied entirely on the competence of one man. When the empire was lucky, it had capable leaders. It benefited from the good emperors, like the philosopher Marcus Aurelius, who stabilized the borders. But it also suffered under Caligula, who executed innocent people on a whim, and Nero, who bankrupted the treasury with massive vanity projects. A government built entirely on the absolute power of individuals means the state lives or dies by a genetic lottery, and a string of deeply flawed, unpredictable autocrats will inevitably fracture the very foundation of the Roman state. By the 3rd century, Rome's borders stretched from Britain to the Middle East. It had grown too large for any single administrative center to control, no matter who was sitting on the throne. This immense scale caused the system to buckle. The empire entered a 100-year period of severe chaos where more than 25 emperors claimed the throne. Almost all of them were assassinated, frequently by their own bodyguards. To save the state from total collapse, Emperor Diocletian applied a radical survival strategy. In 285 AD, he officially divided the Roman Empire into 2 distinct administrative zones, a western half and an eastern half, each with its own ruler. The two halves meant drastically different fates. The Greek-speaking East consolidated its wealth, heavily fortified its capital, and thrived. The Latin-speaking West was drained by a severe economic crisis and left highly vulnerable to repeated invasions by Germanic tribes like the Goths and Vandals. The weakened Western defenses finally gave way. By the year 476 AD, the last Western Roman emperor was deposed, and the imperial infrastructure in the West was completely dismantled. Rome constructed an empire of unparalleled military might and structural complexity, but its collapse proves that no amount of engineering or wealth can sustain a system poisoned by the unchecked concentration of power, severe social inequality, the crushing weight of endless expansion.